So today's program is on the topic of training programs and education on active shooter workplace violence. As many of you probably know, communities across our country are confronting incidents of violence, sometimes high-profile incidents of violence. In response to this increase, the Dane County Sheriff's Office is embarking on an education and training initiative for businesses and community groups. Dane County Emergency Preparedness Coordinator Deputy Josalyn Longley and Dane County Sheriff Dave Mahoney are here today to provide more information on this vital topic. Deputy Josalyn Longley has been with the Dane County Sheriff's Office since 2000. She currently works out of the West Precinct as a community deputy, working closely with other agencies and the community to problem solve regarding issues confronted by the community and families. My friend Dave Mahoney, well, Deputy Longley, perhaps we'll be friends after we meet, but Dave Mahoney, my friend, is currently serving his third term as Dane County Sheriff. He was first elected in November of 2006 to become the 52nd Dane County Sheriff. Dave has been a professional law enforcement officer for 38 years. We look forward to their presentation, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking to us today. As we welcome them to the podium, a quick reminder, again, if time permits, questions, answers. I think you already heard that. Please welcome Sheriff Mahoney and Deputy Longley.
Well, thank you, Madam President and members of Rotary. It's an honor and pleasure to join you today. As I look across the room, I see so many dear friends, colleagues, individuals who I've worked with over my 38-year career and 11 years as your sheriff to make sure that Wisconsin remains the state that it is, and particularly that Dane County remains the best of our 72 counties. As I look across the room, I see colleagues who've worked with me on programs to improve our neighborhoods, our communities, and our county. And many I look across improving life for individuals all across our great state. It's an honor to be joined by two rock stars from the Dane County Sheriff's Office. You heard a little bit about Deputy Longley. I also want to introduce retired Deputy Cindy Holmes, who, because of her rock star status, we brought her back. She was a free agent for a little while, but we brought her back to assist in this very important program. About 18 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, I began hearing, like many of you, the continued incidents of active shooters across our country, in our schools, in our businesses, on our military bases. And I became concerned about what the level of preparedness was in our own community. So I began reaching out to business partners, to churches, to schools. And what I learned was that many in the community were cognizant and aware of what was occurring across the country, but we weren't prepared. So our staff made the conscious decision to pull Jaws from a community deputy position. So those of you who are familiar with neighborhood policing, where an individual is placed into a specific area to address a host of concerns or priorities, Jaws was one of those, as was Cindy. Prior to retirement, Cindy was a community deputy as well. But we felt that there was a priority to create a program that could make Dane County safer and bring awareness to the need of emergency preparedness in the area of active shooters. Since its inception a little over 18 months ago, Jaws and Cindy have trained over 6,000 individuals in response to and preparedness to active shooters. So as Cindy and Jaws know, if you let me talk, I can talk as long as the hook doesn't come out. But it's more important that I share the rock stars that I brought with me today. Joz and Cindy will give you a presentation on active shooters, and please think of some questions. Think of some hardball questions that we can answer for you. Many in the audience I see we're already working with or have worked with in the past. I'm sure that following their presentation, we'll have a few more contacts, and that's exactly what we want. That's how we prepare, that's how we make Dane County safer. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions as well.
Good afternoon. 17 years in law enforcement, I've been called a lot of names. Never a rock star. So that's a first. I just wanted to warn the back table that Mr. Tubbs has threatened to throw tomatoes at us. So if you guys can keep an eye on him back there, we'd appreciate it. Our backup's in the hall, we're good. So we're very honored to be here, and I will say with it being the week of 9/11, a day that we'll never forget, standing here singing Grand Old Flag, that is something I will never forget. So thank you. As a first responder, and I know I can speak for the sheriff and retired Deputy Holmes, I'm honored every day to put this badge on. So it's really nice to be here during this week and having this great conversation, so thank you. As Sheriff Mahoney said, about a year and a half ago, we brought this program to Dane County. About 6,000 citizens in the Dane County area we have trained. And oftentimes the common theme, people, whether we were doing it at a church, at a business, to a community group, there was a lot of anxiety about talking about what to do for an active shooter, an active killer. By the time we went through the training, people left feeling empowered. People left saying, I feel good, I'm gonna do something. And that's truly what this training is about. Cindy, if at any time you have anything to add, just hop on up here. So this is normally about 2 hours, so we're gonna give you a summary in 20 minutes. And I'm maybe even more long-winded than the sheriff, and that's really long-winded. So I will get us through this. Here are some training goals that we normally cover during these trainings. Our goal, we do a lot with schools, but I will tell you, in the last couple months, we've done a lot of partnering with churches and businesses, going in and doing lunch and learns or holding evening seminars for their staff. And we have all the information on that we can give you after. So these are the goals we usually cover. On the bottom of this slide are 3 wonderful active shooter plans: run, hide, fight, ALICE, and avoid, deny, defend. We use the ALICE training for our active shooter training. It doesn't matter what verbiage you use in your business or in your church or in your personal life, but you have to have a plan. Because if your plan, if something were to happen here today, is just to go under the table, crawl next to your chair, and pray that law enforcement gets to you before that killer, that is passiveness, and that is deadly. The FBI, Homeland Security, FEMA, they studied active shooter events for 13 years. And what they truly found is that passiveness is deadly. People have to do something, anything. And I could go on talking about Sandy Hook, the passiveness, Virginia Tech, the passiveness. So truly, this training is about empowerment and about empowering you to do something, anything. Here's a screenshot of active shooter events over the past 15 years, 2000 to 2015. As you can see, we're not immune here in Wisconsin. Cindy tried to use this map as her retirement map to where she should move.
It should be pretty obvious.
But now she's working again, so she can't move. But one of the first times I saw this map come out, we think, we live here in Wisconsin, we're here in Dane County. We are not immune. It can happen here, and we have to be prepared. So over those 15 years, there were 209 active shooter incidents. And I will say, you'll hear me either say active shooter. A lot of the verbiage is actually changing to active killer. If you've seen recently in the media, they're using other methods on carrying out these horrible acts, vehicles, knives, explosives, which is why having situational awareness, not only in the workplace, but in the community, is key. This slide shows location of attacks over those 15 years. So often when people think of active shooter, active killer, they think of schools. If you truly look at statistics, business, commerce, where you are every day, that is where the large majority of these events are taking place. And we're doing a great job in our schools doing these drills and implementing this. Now we need to get it out into the workplace, into our community. So why is preparation necessary? This is a key slide. Time is critical. Over those 13 years, from 2000 to 2013, when they studied the active killer events, they found that they lasted 4 to 8 minutes. 70% were done in 5 minutes or less, which can seem like an eternity if you are there waiting. If you look on a national average for law enforcement response time, we are not there quick enough. If something were to happen here in Dane County, we are not there quick enough. Again, you are the first responders, our kids in the schools. By the time we get on scene, too many people have been injured, too many people have been killed. So this is why we're out in the community doing this training, so that as we're responding there, we know that people in that building are doing something other than just your typical lockdown where they basically hide in a corner. They're trying to get out. They're barricading doors. If the fight comes on, there's a lot of things in here that are going to get thrown at that door when that threat enters. I will tell you, I work rural Dane County, and a 5-minute response time is wonderful. It oftentimes took me 25 minutes just to get to a crash due to where we work. So we have a ton of handouts in the back. Being a community deputy for 12 years, I'm very big on resources. These are the 3 active shooter plans supported by the chiefs of police right here in Dane County. Again, I don't care what verbiage you use, but you have to have options. And you'll hear the words options-based quite a bit. If your option only is, I'm going to run. If I'm at work and someone's shooting, I'm going to run. I'm going to run out that door. At Virginia Tech, that gunman chained the 3 doors of Norris Hall. So if your option was, I'm going to run out that door, what do you do now when you're faced with a door you can't get out? You have to have options. So just for time, I'm just going to walk you through Alice. And I have to remind parents when we do this in the schools, Alice is not the lunch lady. It is the active shooter plan. So if you have kids that talk about Alice, it is a wonderful active shooter plan. So as far as businesses, alert. This has come up a lot in our training with churches and businesses. Do you have a way in your building to alert everyone that there is an event taking place, that someone is shooting, that there's someone in your building stabbing people? That has been a definite, a big barricade we're running into. Or buildings that have multiple businesses within it. Their concern is, I'm on the 6th floor, what if something happens on the 3rd floor? How are we notified within this building? So we've reached out to the Homeland Security FBI, and we've put together some good resources that you can look into. An alert can even be just knowing that there's a threat and telling people. At the Sikh temple down in Oak Creek, a 9 and an 11-year-old ran into that temple yelling, "Man with a gun." That was their alert. Those kids recognized that there was a man with a gun in the parking lot shooting, and they went in and warned people. Key elements to surviving is knowing that there's a threat. Another part of the alert is if you still use codes within your buildings, code words such as code black, code pink, code purple, That is no longer recommended by the FBI. It needs to be plain language. If you are at the mall tonight and you hear a code black, what does that mean? Sale at Victoria's Secret, sale at JCPenney's. What? There isn't one, don't worry, Mark. What does that mean? It needs to be plain language. There is a woman with a gun near Boston store, because people will react based on the information they get. Lockdown. If people don't have a way to get out or can't run towards the threat, do people in your building, or if you're at church, are you aware of areas that you can get behind a locked door? And if you can't lock it, have you thought about ways you could barricade a door? We've been doing barricading drills with teachers at certain schools in Dane County. Those teachers are very creative. And I'll tell you what, we can't get those doors open. Sandy Hook, 26 and 7-year-olds were killed. 6 teachers were killed. In order to lock those classroom doors, those teachers had to go out into a hallway with a key to lock the door. If there's shots fired and kids running, your motor skills are going to be one of the first things you lose. So when we go through buildings, oftentimes we'll ask them, how can your employees lock their office? And, well, they have to get the janitor who has to get the key to lock their door. Well, that's probably not going to happen in an event like this. So it's better to think of these things ahead of time than when they're happening. Inform, and I'm sorry I'm going through this, I just want to fit it all in. The inform portion of Alice. If you have to call 911, the importance of telling our citizens immediately get out where you are and what is happening. Don't always rely on GPS from cell phones. I cannot tell you the number of calls we get where someone is at a Walgreens and there's an overdose. Do you know how many Walgreens there are in Madison? A lot. You need to be aware of where you're at when you call 911. Or if it's a large building. If you're in a large business building and you say there's someone in here shooting, what floor, what side of the building? Do you have numbered doors? Can you give us that? These are key elements to increasing your chances of survival. A lot of people don't know this, but in Dane County, you can text 911. They're actually the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. They were receiving very important text messages from a hero inside that bathroom. Obviously, it's more of a delay, but in a situation like this, you may not be able to talk. The C in Alice is the counter. This is the last resort. This is the empowerment of us telling you, if you are somewhere and that threat is now actively killing people and gets to where you're at, you need to do something so you go home to your families. Whether it's throwing chairs, glasses, I'm just using this room. What can you do to distract that threat or counter? And again, being the week of 9/11, I think of that flight when they said, let's roll. Evacuate and escape, number 1. If you are ever involved in an incident where there is someone actively killing people, you need to get out. That is number 1. So when we do the trainings, we challenge people. Do you truly know all your exits in your building, in your church, in places you frequent? When you come here, were you even aware that there are exits back there? Because I guarantee if something happens, everyone is going to run back to the door that they came in. We are creatures of habit. So being more aware of your surroundings can truly save your life. Also, if you need to break a window to get out, know the center of a window, if you throw a chair at that, it's going to flex, and that chair is going to come right back at you. So we talk about the importance of breaking the corners of the windows to get out. Windows can make a great exit. A lot of kids are alive at Virginia Tech because they went out the windows. How are we doing in time? Okay, we're good. Because only questions, no stories. Okay. See Something, Say Something is an amazing program that Homeland Security has put together. Cindy and I are in the process of getting more handouts made. If you go to the Mall of America, you'll see a flyer like this about every 10 feet. see something, say something. If we can ask for your help with anything today, it would be this. According to the FBI, more of these events are stopped by Jane or John Doe simply reporting something that they thought was suspicious. We have handouts on this back there too, but what can companies do? What can organizations do? Do assessments. Put together emergency operation plans. Do training. Provide this free training for your employees, for your group, for your organization, to simply take the time to think about it. If you haven't thought about what you would do, you are more likely to freeze. That's why in law enforcement, we train the way we do. We train for things that I pray I'm never greeted with, but if I am, I've thought about it. The mind can't go where the body can't go where the mind hasn't been. And I feel like I'm losing my mind a lot lately, so I'm a little concerned. So why practice? Why mentally prepare for this? I can guarantee you all know what you're going to do if there's a fire. You've thought about it. You talk about stop, drop, and roll probably since you were this big. You've thought about where your exits are. You may be mandated to do drills. When do you think the last time a teacher or student died in a school fire? Because our schools, they have fire drills down. My kids know exactly what to do for a fire drill. President, when do you think the last time a student or teacher died in a school fire? You can't cheat. 1865. Oh, 1965. That's the closest anyone has ever been. We'll have to get you a badge. 1958 in Chicago. When do you think the last time a student or teacher died in a school shooting? I honestly can't even, we try to stay up to date. So we have to talk about this. We have to prepare for it and hope it's something that we never, ever use. So I'll leave you with this quote. And we did present to some sixth graders, and they knew who Theodore Roosevelt was. So just so you know, there is some hope for our future. In the moment of decision, if you are ever faced with an active killer, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. And I'm a negotiator on our SWAT team, and I've sat in on a lot of tactical debriefs, and it's really hard to hear of all the shootings where people just sat there and did nothing. And we want to empower you here in Dane County to do something. And, okay.
I want to take just a moment and digress from the presentation to talk about our rock stars. Joz just mentioned that she's a negotiator. Does anybody here live in Monona? This past week was a critical incident in Monona involving a wanted attempted murder from City Madison. Well, Joz was there as a negotiator. She was there with our tactical team who was faced, quite honestly, with multiple legal opportunities to take a life. But it was through their training. Again, the body can't go where the mind hasn't been, as Joz said. That's why we train. Even faced with multiple opportunities to legally use deadly force, that team chose to use opportunities to save a life. Joz was there as a negotiator, de-escalating this individual. And in the end, certainly some property was lost, but some heroes emerged. The firefighters in Monona, superheroes, who behind the shield of a tactical member were able to get up and save the homes on either side. The tactical members, the bomb squad members who were there operating their robots, the negotiators, So when Jaws says, I never considered myself a rock star, every one of us who lives in this great county are blessed to have rock stars who've answered the call to serve others before oneself. Again, I want to take a moment to thank you as Rotarians. You're serving others before oneself. So we'll open it up for questions.
And just 1 second, sir.
Ladies first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I told him it's his fault if I do something he doesn't like because they hired me twice, so. I just wanted to really quickly point you towards some information that we have on the table as you come in the door. One thing is there's some pamphlets that you'll see like this. This gives you a brief summary of the information that Josh talked about today, and there's a way to go on our website at danesheriff.com to request a presentation. As she said, normally we'd spend about anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. Optimally, 2 hours is perfect to present the full program. So you can do that with this. Another thing is prevention. Really, with anything that you're talking about is key. And so we've included some warning signs that you can look at, read, kind of identify, and sort of, I guess, test yourself to see if you can read this and other people when things start to escalate. Because before we get to a point like this, we'd like to be able to address issues and problems with people that are starting to escalate, whether it's mental health or just anger or whatever it is. So please feel free to take some of these. And then also, as business people, as all of you, most of you are, there's a pamphlet, Josalyn mentioned, see something, say something. I believe there's a way to go on a website with this, and if you take the pamphlet, it should be on there somewhere. You can actually have like posters made up that you can put in your businesses and just remind people. Oftentimes we hear, I didn't call because I didn't want to bother you. And I can tell you after between 26 and 32 years total of being in this line of work, I would much rather go to something and it turned out to be nothing for a lot of reasons, mostly because I didn't have to do any paperwork. But I'd much rather go to something and figure out that it's nothing than have it be something and nobody call us. So I just want to draw your attention to this. So thank you guys so much. Please, questions.
So my question is, what guidance would you have for employers about whether or not to make their workplace a gun-free zone?
That question comes up a lot. It does. But
He was hoping it's nice to be able to delegate.
well, that question does come up a lot, and I always say I represent the sheriff, so I can't give you, direct. One thing that comes up with the guns and the carry conceal, questions always are coming up, is we remind people there are a lot of people that allow guns, there are a lot of people that may even carry conceal, but are they actually training and do they have the mindset that if something happened, they would be able to stop that threat? Because it could be a 12-year-old. It could be a 12-year-old coming in. So I always go back to training. If that's something that you want a gun-free zone, you don't want a gun-free zone, that is entirely up to you. But make sure if you decide to allow that and allow your business to have that, make sure that people are training and have that mindset. Keep in mind, a lot of people carry and don't pay attention to signage. So you may have people in your business that carry every day. So something you need to think about is if they're not disturbing anyone, but you clearly just see a firearm, how are you addressing that? Have you thought about that with your risk management and your HR? Because that happens a lot. People risk the trespassing ticket because they would rather have their firearm on their hip. So I probably didn't answer your question, did I? Because I can send the ball back to him. Okay.
Did that give you enough? Well, I can take an entire session on this issue. I'm not in favor of concealed carry. It's no secret. Although I can tell you as a law enforcement officer, we weren't alarmed or unprepared because quite honestly, in our business, we assume everybody's armed. And so this wasn't a big surprise. The problem is, as Josalyn said, a lack of training. I like to tell people that my father, who turned 90 this past week, Korean War vet, qualifies for a concealed carry permit because when he was in basic training, he learned how to use a handgun. But he hasn't shot one since the Korean War. Okay, now think about if he were to carry a concealed weapon, is he prepared to act? My answer is no, he's not. So I'm not in favor of those zones. That's why we have law enforcement officers.
With Donna's permission, before my question, I want to thank you for everything you do. I was at an active shooter drill that took place at Middleton High School, and you guys were there. Middleton Police was there. Chief Tubbs and Mike Metcalf was there, and a lot of people who were just wonderfully coordinated. We hear about the response that you provide when something happens. We don't hear a lot about the training that happens beforehand and the coordination, and it's impeccable and admirable, and thank you for doing that. My question is about the fact that, you know, an active shooter is different from most criminals, because if you rob a bank or if you shoot someone you don't like, the expectation is you hope to get away. And in most cases, an active shooter goes into a school or a business thinking, I'm going to kill the people I'm mad about. I don't care what happens to me afterwards. How does that change the dynamics of how you prepare for something like that and how you deal with it?
Good question.
Yeah, very good question. So you have to understand that, first of all, there is no good profile. When you're talking about active shooter, active killer, the FBI does, they do profiles for different types of criminals and what to look for and maybe what they're like and all sorts of things. With active shooter or active killers, there is no profile that fits. It could be anybody, any age, any background, whatever. So what happens is when an incident like this occurs, Josalyn's part of the negotiating team, hostage negotiator on the department. There is no negotiating. What happens in the mindset of an active shooter, the one thing that is consistent is regardless of why they get to where they are, and a lot of times it's from domestic violence, stems from that, is that what they want are numbers. They want high numbers. And so that's why you see them oftentimes targeting schools, campuses, businesses, parks, things like that, where you see people in large numbers or larger numbers. So when we go, we know that there is no talking, there is negotiating. And so we have to prepare ourselves for the fact that we may end up confronting that person and have to be the person to decide, how we're going to end this. And oftentimes it is when that person either is shot by law enforcement, most often they kill themselves before we actually get to them. So, how do we handle it? We handle it like we do everything else. We train, we think about it, we prepare ourselves mentally, which is what we would like the community to start doing and why it's important to think about it. We changed the way that we responded to these incidents after Columbine. And I can't imagine, is there anybody in here that doesn't know what Columbine is? I mean, that would be saying, what was 9/11? Everybody knows. We changed the way we did our tactics after that, because what we used to do is we respond and then we'd set up a perimeter and wait for our SWAT team, our tactical response team, to show up. And I believe, weren't you on the bomb squad at one point in the TRT? Tactical response. So the sheriff can attest to this. It could be minutes, depending on where everybody is, or an hour or two, because they don't drive around in, which they would love to, but they don't drive around their armored vehicle all day just waiting, right? They're off, they're working other assignments, they're whatever. And so they have to call everybody in like a volunteer fire department. So we would sit there and have to wait. In the meantime, what do you think is occurring inside? More victims, more deaths. So after Columbine, we decided we can't wait anymore. So what happens is a call comes out, I can guarantee you if something happens in Dane County, just about every agency is probably going to have somebody going. And so if it's just me and Josalyn that show up, guess what? Me and Josalyn go in. So we train that, and we train it regularly because we have to be prepared. I don't know if that answers your question.
There are about 100,000 people who are blind or visually impaired who live in the Milwaukee, Madison, Janesville area. How do you adapt this type of training for those folks?
Never been asked.
Yeah. You know what? Great question. We have never been asked that yet. But I think that's something we need to look into. Absolutely. I do know there's a new, it's called Blue Alert, I believe. It is for people that are hard of hearing. It's a blue light that alerts, similar to a fire alarm, that a lot of some schools are getting in businesses now, or it may be a warehouse where they maybe couldn't hear a PA announcement or they couldn't hear gunfire, so it's more of a visual alert. But as far as this, thank you. That's something we need to look into.
So one of the things that we've done since Josalyn started putting these things together is we make contact with people who request the presentations, and we always ask them, are there any special concerns or needs that you have? And so hopefully they would let us know that up front so that we could either have somebody who knew American Sign Language or whatever the case may be, or had audio assistance to be able to help us with that. But that's definitely something that we ask of people, what do you need in above everything else? So.
Last question. So this is not a question about active shooting. This is really more of a question about lethal force. I know you guys have been trained very well to use lethal force, but my question is, every time you draw a gun, do you have to use lethal force? Is there every time you could shoot somebody in the leg, shoot them in the arm?
Every time we draw a gun, no, we don't have to shoot it. As it relates to the often asked question, well, when you have to use force, can't you shoot the gun out of their hand or shoot them in the leg? I'll be quite honest, we're not that good. No, the real answer is that our responsibility is to end the threat, end the deadly threat. So we shoot for center of mass. And if we happen to hit them in the gun and the gun falls on the ground, that's it, end of game. We don't continue shooting. However, if we shoot them once, twice, 3 times, and the force continues to come using deadly force, we continue to fire until that threat is neutralized. Does that answer your question?
We definitely are using 2 of the last gun calls I've been on. We use less lethal beanbag rounds.
Yeah.
They both displayed firearms.
In Monona, as an example, that gentleman got hit multiple times with beanbags. And I can tell you, having been hit by beanbags, you don't want to be hit by these. No. It's like getting hit with a Louisville slugger. Just to follow up to your firearm on the work site, as Cindy mentioned, the practices of active shooter response by law enforcement has changed. We no longer set up a perimeter and wait. As soon as we have 2, 3 officers on the scene, we move. And we moved to end the threat. The last thing we want to encounter, having known that there are bodies either severely injured or dead, and we're looking for somebody with a gun, is to encounter an employee carrying a gun. Okay.
Thank you, Sheriff Mahoney and company, for a very informative presentation. I also want to point out that Rotarian Nancy Young has been deployed to Houston, so send your thoughts and prayers with her to help out the hurricane victims, and we are adjourned.